This year, the biggest technology companies on Earth are on track to spend more than $700 billion building out artificial intelligence. That is roughly 2.5 cents of every dollar the entire United States economy produces. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang accurately describes this as the largest infrastructure build-out in human history. But look past the sheer size of the hardware, and a much quieter problem emerges. How exactly are the safest, most cash-rich companies in the world actually paying for all this? This chart shows how much of their own cash flow these companies typically reinvest. For the last decade, they spent roughly 40 to 50 cents of every dollar produced on capital expenditures. This year, estimates place that number at 94%. They are running their entire cash engines just to finance the AI build-out. The vast corporate vaults aren't securely funding the expansion anymore. They are being actively drained by it. And that means these companies have to look elsewhere for the money. When the cash reserves started running dry, big tech hit the bond markets. From 2020 to 2024, the 5 largest hyperscalers were already issuing about $28 billion a year in bonds. Then the pace broke. In just the first 5 months of this year, that same group issued another $159 billion. In less than half a year, they borrowed more than they had in the entire previous 5 years combined. The technology sector suddenly accounts for nearly 18. The deepest capital market on Earth could not absorb what these companies needed to build. Exhausting their domestic limits pushed the tech giants to step beyond normal financial boundaries. In the summer of 2007, an economist stood up at the Federal Reserve's annual symposium in Jackson Hole to warn of a second banking system growing in the dark. He called it the shadow banking system. It was built on institutions that borrowed and lent like banks, but completely avoided the regulations designed to keep the economy safe. Today, the AI build-out runs on the exact same financial machinery. To move debt out of sight, companies rely on something called a special purpose vehicle, or SPV. Think of it like opening a credit card in your cousin's name. You swipe the card, you enjoy the items purchased, but when the bank asks about your liabilities, your answer is technically zero, because the debt legally belongs to the cousin. We can see this live in the largest project financing ever completed as an investment-grade bond. It's an SPV called Beignet Investor, carrying $27 billion in debt. This diagram illustrates exactly how Beignet operates. A private investment firm called Blue Owl puts up the capital and owns 80% of the structure. Meta owns the remaining 20% and signs on as the sole tenant of the rural Louisiana data center it finances. The SPV then borrows the $27 billion. Because of a single phrase in the accounting rules, capping ownership at 20% means Meta is not the primary beneficiary of the venture. As a result, that $27 billion liability is wiped completely from Meta's public books. The debt doesn't actually disappear. It is precisely engineered to bypass public scrutiny, shifting massive financial burdens straight into the shadows. But despite the legal distance on paper, Meta is intrinsically tied to the building. They design it, build it, and run their own hyper-customized hardware inside it. To find out what happens if things go wrong, you have to read the footnotes. On page 106 of Meta's annual report, one buried sentence outlines residual value guarantees with an aggregate threshold of approximately $28 billion. This means if the data center's value drops and Meta walks away, Meta has secretly agreed to write a massive check to the shadow lenders to cover the difference. And the lenders are acutely exposed to that walkaway scenario. The bonds issued to finance the build-out run all the way to 2049, but the underlying lease is negotiated in 4-year chunks. It is a 24-year loan resting entirely on a short 4-year commitment. It is a deliberate dual reality. The tech company gets to assure Wall Street that their balance sheet is clean, while privately guaranteeing the entire risk to the shadow lenders backing the build-out. Beignet quickly became a template. BlackRock recently started marketing Project Sophia, a $12 billion sequel for a new AI data center in Texas, using the exact same structure. This chart visualizes the true scale of the contagion. Across the 5 biggest tech firms, there is about $1.35 trillion of visible debt on their books, but the estimated volume of off-book obligations has surged to $1.65 trillion. The sheer volume of the debt is only part of the problem. The true systemic risk comes from the fact that the same small handful of private lenders is funding every single deal across the industry. When 5 borrowers use the identical structure funded by the identical club, the financial risk is no longer diversifiable. By rapidly copying this high-risk funding mechanism, the tech industry has woven a deeply concentrated, fragile web of correlated debt. The last 2 times a financing structure standardized this fast across an entire industry, we got the telecom vendor financing crash of 2000 and the mortgage securitization crisis of 2008. The AI build-out requires us to rethink our assumptions about the technology sector's strength. It is a massive financial parlay, a highly leveraged bet where every single condition has to hit perfectly. For this to work, AI revenue must multiply to cover the staggering upfront costs. The financial returns on every new dollar invested must stop shrinking. The massive borrowing window in the shadow banking system must stay open, and the physical power grid must somehow absorb the immense energy required. If even a single leg of this parlay fails, the $1.65 trillion shadow bubble collapses, leaving the global economy to cover the fallout.